So when it comes to the history of food, the Renaissance period in Europe, which lasted from about 1400 to 1600, most of the foods, or some of the foods at least, that we enjoy in today's modern world actually came onto the European scene during the Renaissance. Then of course those foods were thus brought from Europe to here in America in the New World. So what better way to look into the foods of the Renaissance period than right here at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. So in this video I'm going to tour the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, and I'm going to look into how historically accurate or inaccurate the food at a Renaissance festival is as it pertains to the food that was available in Europe during the Renaissance. I'm Dāv Kaufman, and this is Dāv Kaufman Eats the World. Alright, so we made it in the Renaissance Festival. I don't know why I said it like that. It wasn't hard. We gave somebody a ticket. They let us in the door. That's how it works. So if you've been watching my other channels, keeping up with me over the years, there's something about me that you just might not know, and that's that I do have a BA in history. But we're going to start our Renaissance food tour right here. Maybe over there. I don't know. Could be over there. But we're going to walk around this festival, and we are going to pick out some of the foods that they offer here at the festival and see, again, just how historically accurate they were to the Renaissance period in Europe. Let's go that way. Look at this. I love that somebody put a TARDIS here. I wonder who did that. All right, we're moving on. All right, so our first stop is right here at Snot's Knots Pretzels. You may think it's funny, but it's not. We are going to get a pretzel here and find out if that is in fact historically accurate to the Renaissance period. So I've dipped into this quiet little area and we've got our pretzel here. So are pretzels historically accurate to the Renaissance period? And the answer is a resounding yes, in fact they are. As a matter of fact, during the Renaissance, pretzels were widely popular across Europe, primarily associated with monasteries where monks would often produce them as a treat to reward children who learned their prayers. And they were made of a simple mixture of water, flour, and salt, and quickly gained popularity as they were the ideal food to consume during Lent, when all types of meat, dairy, eggs were prohibited by the church. So by the end of the Renaissance, pretzels were the most popular and plentiful junk food throughout Europe. But what they didn't do was dip them in salt like we often do today. In fact, recipes of the period often called for them to be covered in cinnamon or sugar. Pretzels were one of the first European foods to come to the New World, with records that they were a staple food on the Mayflower. And today, they are found in every shopping mall and, of course, Renaissance festivals throughout the country. But all that being said, let's try out the soft pretzel here at the Renaissance Festival. So my first reaction is, this isn't kind of light and airy like other pretzels are. And as a matter of fact, I think light and airy pretzels actually detract from the enjoyment of eating a pretzel. Pretzels should be hard-packed, they should be chewy, and this one absolutely is. This particular pretzel is probably more historically accurate than pretzels that you're going to find in any other fair. It is tightly rolled, really dense bread. This is basically as similar to pretzels as you could actually get in the Renaissance period here at the Renaissance Festival. So Snot's Knots, you actually did pretzels right, and pretty historically accurate. That's unfortunate. All right, so next up, I don't know, let's go find a bread bowl. Next up, we've got one of the signature items that you're gonna find at any Renaissance festival, the bread bowl. These come with chicken wild rice, which is, you know, indigenous to Minnesota. This is the beef stew bread bowl. The reason why I got this is it's just a little bit more historically accurate to the Renaissance than chicken wild rice. Chicken wild rice is historically accurate to right here in Minnesota. I may go back and get that later, but for right now, for our historical purposes, we are diving in to the beef stew bread bowl. So during the Renaissance in Europe, did they actually have bread bowls? And the answer again is yes, they did. The bread bowl actually predates the Renaissance period. Early texts from the end of the medieval period talked about bakers who, for the government-regulated price of 1 penny, would bake any meats you brought to them into a bread, basically a meat pie, and it might cost a little extra if you wanted that meat made into a stew and served on top of bread. So it didn't take long for the meat pie to simply be converted into soups served in hollowed-out loaves of bread, and hence the bread bowl first appeared during this time. It was actually considered a form of fast food during the day, and back then it was known as treacher's. It was a quick and simple grab-and-go meal that gained popularity throughout Renaissance Europe and has changed very little ever since then. So yes, again, another historically accurate food. I'm just gonna take this top and set it aside. Look at that. That is chock full of stewy goodness right there. Sadly, not a lot of stew in this. They just kind of took like an ice cream scooper and scooped out the top of the bread and put a little bit of this stew in there. So unfortunately, this is mainly bread. So this really isn't a bread bowl, it's more of a bread scoop. But we've got carrots in here, we've got beef, we've got peas, we've got potatoes, and it's all put together with this nice brown gravy. So we're gonna grab some of this meat here and we're just gonna try this out. That does have a nice, rich, savory flavor to it. That meat is really tender. So now I'm gonna take just a big old chunk of this bread bowl, get some of that nice gravy on there, get some of those other ingredients on there. We're gonna try this out with the bread. Sadly to say, it's a little underwhelming. The bread doesn't have a lot of flavor to it. It basically tastes like almost the cheapest white bread that they could come up with. Overall, this is a historically accurate dish for the Renaissance, and it probably didn't taste very good back in the Renaissance either, but it's good, but it's not great. So right behind me, we've got tacos. Are tacos historically accurate to the Renaissance? Well, we're gonna go over and get a taco and we'll talk about that. So here we have our Renaissance taco. So did they in fact know that the taco existed in Renaissance Europe? Well, the answer to that is maybe. So a brief history about the taco, it does date back to the Aztec Empire, and what they would do is they would basically take these flat pieces of bread and use that to pick up fish or some kind of meat. Then they would have basically meat within this bread, essentially the precursor to the modern taco. But during the Renaissance period in Europe, people like Cortez and his merry band of rapists and murderers did in fact invade Mexico and Central and South America during the Renaissance period in Europe. So they did witness this basic precursor to the taco from the Aztec Empire, and they probably took that information back to Europe. And so if you lived in the Renaissance period in Europe and you had really a keen interest in foods from the New World, then yes, you probably knew that the taco in some form existed. However, the taco that we now know and love today, where you have this flour tortilla, you've got the cheese, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the salsa, and the meat, whether it be beef or chicken, a taco like this really didn't make the world culinary debut until the turn of the 20th century. So is a taco historically accurate to the Renaissance? Again, it's a maybe. And that's a far stretch to even call it a maybe. All right, so I elected to get the beef taco, and basically all it is beef, lettuce, cheese on a tortilla. I'm not expecting to be wowed by this, but I do love tacos. Let's dig in. Yep, pretty much exactly as I expected. Tortilla, lettuce, cheese, beef. We all know what that tastes like. I'm not really wowed by this, but it's a taco, and really, who can be sad eating a taco? So here we have a new item for this year's Renaissance Festival. This is chicken wild rice pizza. So basically what they've done here is they've taken a personal-sized pizza dough, they've put that wild rice soup on it, which is like a cream-based soup with wild rice, which is indigenous to Minnesota. There's chunks of ham in there, there's chunks of carrots, and then they smother it with cheese. This could either be the best pizza I've ever had or a complete culinary disaster. We're about to find out. But before we do that, did they actually have pizza in the European Renaissance? And the answer is yes, they actually did. So if you have kind of a basic understanding of history, then there's a lot of things that you believe that actually happened that didn't. So it's long thought that Marco Polo left Europe, traveled to China, and brought back all of these really interesting culinary things to Europe, like ice cream, for instance, noodles that later turned into spaghetti, and pizza. And again, it's long thought that Marco Polo brought all of these from China back to Europe. He did not. As a matter of fact, there's really very little evidence that Marco Polo made it to China at all. So pizza actually came on the scene pretty close to the beginning of the Renaissance period. Pizza was not only available in the Renaissance, its origin is actually hundreds of years older than the Renaissance, having been documented in ancient Greece and China. As it started to develop into what we now know of pizza during the close of the medieval period, and as it progressed into the Renaissance, it was actually considered cheap peasant food. And it was also during the end of the Renaissance in Italy that pizza underwent a radical change, and that was the addition of tomatoes and tomato sauce. So yes, the pizza as we know it did develop during the Renaissance period of Europe, and frankly, it's changed very little since then. All right, so now that we have a little better understanding of the history of pizza, and now we know that yes, in the European Renaissance, they did have pizza, we're just gonna go in and take a bite. Okay, where do I begin with this? First of all, it is way too salty, and all I taste is bread and salt. I can't taste that really rich, creamy flavor of that wild rice soup. Can't taste the wild rice, can't taste the chicken. All I taste is basically bread and salt. Wow, this is something that I was really interested to try because I really love wild rice. I really love wild rice soup, really love pizza. Put the two together, this could have been really good. Sadly, it is not. This is a total miss. So right here we have got loaded baked potato skins. I'm not even sure what this is, to be honest with you, because it looks like the potato is burnt to a crisp, and anytime that you need to add fake cheese to real cheese, like what's piled on top of this, not really expecting good things out of this. So potatoes are actually native to southern Peru and that area of South America. So in the Renaissance period in Europe, did they know about the potato? The answer is yes, in fact, they did. During the Renaissance is when all the ships from all different countries in Europe went to the New World, brought back all these really amazing things that people in Europe were seeing for the first time. And amongst those was potatoes. And potatoes during the Renaissance period of Europe, they were so rare that only royalty and nobility could afford potatoes. Interestingly enough, though, it was thought that any root vegetable that grows underground was considered to be peasant food. It grew under the ground, the peasants were that lowly, therefore it was reserved for the peasants. And any vegetables or fruits that grew above ground, that was reserved for the nobility and the royalty. So, even though the potato was considered the food of royalty because of its rarity, what do you think happened when they found out that these actually grow underground and they were actually eating peasant food? To be honest, by the time that potatoes took root, no pun intended, and started becoming readily available and grown in Europe, by then the Renaissance was probably pretty much over, and the royalty and the nobility didn't know where potatoes actually came from. And if they did know about it, they probably didn't care because of how rare potatoes were and how it was a status symbol to actually eat potatoes on your table at your meal. So, with that being said, We are going to try out these potato skins. Like I said, these are burnt to a crisp. They use that fake kind of melted cheese on there. Added some tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and then they added basically unmelted cheese on top of that. But we're gonna try it out anyway. Here we go. Okay. That's absolutely disgusting. Those potatoes are so overcooked that they lack all taste. They taste burnt. And I'm telling you, if this dish wound up on the plates of the nobility and the royalty in Renaissance Europe, the potato probably would have never caught on and never graced another plate on the plates of the royalty or the nobility. So before we move on to the final item that we're gonna try here at the Renaissance Festival, we're gonna try something sweet. We're gonna put dessert before the main course, which is actually how they used to serve meals back in the Renaissance. You would get served something savory, then something sweet, then again something savory, then again something sweet. The idea of having something sweet as the final part of a meal is actually a relatively new concept. So on a hot Minnesota summer day like today, there are tons of vendors serving ice cream, and right over here, we've got something pretty unique, and that is the Hot Honey Sundae. So, was there actually ice cream during the Renaissance? Let's go get a sundae and talk about that. So right here we have the Hot Honey Sundae. It's basically vanilla ice cream, hot honey with spiced peanuts on top, and a couple of cherries. But did they actually have ice cream during the Renaissance in Europe? And the answer to that is yes, they actually did. Earlier before, I talked about how Marco Polo was credited with bringing ice cream from China to Europe, and there really is no real solid historic record that Marco Polo did bring ice cream to Europe. So how did ice cream in Europe begin? Well, it actually began in Italy during the Renaissance. The Renaissance began in Italy, and what they found was they found that by having dairy products such as milk and yogurt, things that would spoil pretty much overnight, they needed to find a way to preserve that. And the way that they did that was they simply took ice and salt, which creates this chemical reaction which can actually freeze things to below 0 Celsius. So when they added ice and salt to things like cream to try to preserve it longer, what they found is ice cream. Interestingly enough, long time before that, the Chinese also found out about this process. But what they didn't have at the beginning of the Renaissance was sugar. That came during the Renaissance, but much later when it became more readily available from the New World. So a lot of the desserts that they would have and a lot of the sweets that they would have during the Renaissance was actually sweetened by honey. So would a hot honey sundae be authentic to the Renaissance? Absolutely, yes it would. But certainly not like this. Basically, the ice cream that they had wasn't really sweet, didn't have a lot of sugar in it like our ice cream does, but they definitely had ice cream and they definitely sweetened things with honey before sugar came along. All right, so that being said, I'm gonna try this out. I've got a big spoonful of that ice cream, that hot honey on the bottom, and those peanuts on top. Let's try this out. Oh yeah, that's just about as good as you can imagine. That hot honey and those spiced peanuts are extremely complementary to the creaminess of this ice cream. This is by far one of the best sweet treats that I've had so far here at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. This is absolutely a hit. All right, so now that I have vigorously finished off our sundae, our hot honey sundae here, we come to the final item I'm going to try here at the Renaissance Festival, and it's maybe the most controversial. So everywhere around here, you see turkey legs, and the one thing that I hear from most people, the one criticism that I hear is, it's a turkey. It's native to North America. They didn't know what a turkey was in the Renaissance period in Europe. This is so inaccurate to serve turkey legs at a Renaissance Festival. But is that true? I'm going right over there and I'm getting one of these bad boys, and we're gonna talk about this. Turkey leg, please.
Here we go, my lord.
Oh, look at that. That thing's massive. All right, off we go. Thank you. All right, so I've got my big old Brontosaurus leg here. You know, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but Minnesota is known for turkeys. We grow a lot of turkeys here. Jenny O is here. A bunch of other companies are here. That is why we have the biggest turkey legs at any Renaissance Festival that you're gonna find right here in Minnesota. This is a monster. I'm not gonna be able to finish this. I'm gonna have like 4 or 5 people help me with this thing. But let's go back real quick before I eat this. It's really hot. It's gonna cool down while I tell this story. In the Renaissance period in Europe, they ate a ton of birds, and it didn't matter what it was. Chickens, ducks, songbirds. If it was a bird, it wound up in a banquet. And the more exotic the bird, the more it was sought after by the nobility and the royalty. But for all of those people that criticized this as not being authentic to the Renaissance in Europe because the turkey is native to North America, and therefore, how did anybody in Renaissance Europe know that the turkey existed? Actually, they absolutely did. And towards the end of the Renaissance, when the ships were going back and forth from Europe to the New World, bringing new things and new foods to Europe, they actually did bring the wild turkey from North America back to Europe at the end of the Renaissance. But it was so expensive that only, again, the nobility and the royalty could afford this exotic bird. So when you come to a Renaissance festival like this and you get one of these iconic turkey legs that you can find here at a Renaissance festival, not only is it historically accurate that they did know what a turkey was and they did eat it, but when you eat a turkey leg here at the Renaissance Festival, you're actually eating the food of nobility. You're eating the foods of royalty when you have a turkey leg at a Renaissance Festival. All right, so now that I've dispelled the myth that they had no idea what a turkey was in Renaissance Europe, this has cooled down a bit. This is one of my favorite things to get at a Renaissance fair. I'm going in and I'm taking a big old bite. Yep. This is the food of royalty. It is nice and juicy, nice and tender, really flavorful. This is the reason to come to a Renaissance festival, just to sink your teeth into one of these bad boys. So let's face it, when you come to a Renaissance fair, you're not coming here to get authentic food that was available during the time of the Renaissance. You're coming to a fair, and you should experience a Renaissance festival as a fair, complete with the merriment, the fun, the food, and just the experience of coming to a Renaissance festival. And really, it doesn't matter if the food is authentic to the Renaissance period or not. It's still a really incredibly fun time. And while you can find some foods here that when you throw it away, the garbage spits it back, you can also find some food like this that's absolutely incredible. So, guys, if you're hungry for more, check out that video right there. If you're starving for more, check out that playlist right there. I'm gonna spend the next 4 or 5 hours trying to consume every last bit of this Brontosaurus leg. That's a good start.